G'day YouTube, Warbles on the lot here. We're looking at the bottom Buoywall-Tank, and we come to have a look at the top Buoywall-Tank, and it doesn't seem to be in such good condition. Its ultraviolet cover has been ripped and torn, and the water's all been churned up. And that happened this morning at about 8 o'clock. And there's a few other things that are not sort of where they should be, like this siphon hose. Normally that should be hanging on the fence there, rather than decorating the ground in front of the tank with the torn up ultraviolet cover. Over here we have a length of stiff polypipe, and it doesn't normally live on the ground there either. Its usual place is woven into that panel to form part of the barricade to keep the critters out of the bottom Buoywall-Tank, because I'm used to the idea that kangaroos and swamp wallabies have got really sharp claws, and if they try to drink from the tank direct, they will tear a hole in the buoy wall, or in the air boom of the buoy wall. The vinyl bag itself's pretty tough, but that air boom, it's fragile, which is why this air boom has been filled with expanding foam, because it had a leak that I couldn't manage to master. So anyway, what happened this morning was that when I looked out from the front door of the hut, as I usually do to feed the kangaroos bread, suddenly the kangaroos spooked and they ran away, and they ran away that away because of a sudden noise coming from that away. So I stepped out, and when I looked down this way, I was rewarded by the upsetting sight of a swamp wallaby, one of the footlings. It was what I call fruit salad, daughter of fruit cake, and she was in the pool, and she was terrified, and she was trying to hop out, but there was just too much water for her to hop out, and she couldn't do it. And the temperature under the trees here was 9 degrees last night, so the water was pretty cold. So A, she was terrified, and B, she was in imminent danger of, hypothermia. So I had to do something. And like, what do you do? How do you get a terrified swamp wallaby, a wild one that you can't touch? And this is one that's never even eaten from my hand. She takes bread from 2 meters if I throw it to her, but she won't take it out of my hand. How do you get a terrified swamp wallaby out of the Chinese swimming pool? Happily, she was in the one where the air boom was full of foam, so she wasn't tearing holes in the air boom, but she made mincemeat of the ultraviolet cover. And the first thing that I tried and discovered didn't work was the concept of using the siphon hose as a sort of double-ended shepherd's crook to try and reach in there and get it under a shoulder or something and pull her out. And that didn't work worth a cracker, because she's a wild swamp wallaby, so she just kept trying to escape. That was when I thought of using the rope as a lasso. If I could get this over her head, then I could pull her out. But, it's only got a really short little tail on the rope. It's not a very good lasso. And I tried this a couple of times, but initially she was full of vim and vigour, and she was too scared to get close enough for this to work. So I grabbed a hold of the polypipe, and I tried to get this underneath her and maybe lift her out. And I was particularly trying to push her towards that low spot on the boom where there wasn't much foam in it. But yeah, that didn't actually work either. And after, 20 seconds, half a minute of fiddling around with the polypipe, I decided to go back to the lasso idea. And yeah, it actually worked. I was able to approach through here at a point where she was already over here. I'd started off with me over on the other side of the pool there, and she was of course frightened of me. So therefore she came over here, and by that point in time she was actually too cold and too tired to get anywhere very fast. So I was able to get the noose around her neck and then tighten it and pull her straight out over the edge and get her onto the ground. Trouble is, by that point the noose was down at choke point, and she was even more scared, more terrified, more bewildered, and I had to try and reach in to grab the fortuitous extra long tail on the other end of the lasso. I've never really understood why that knot was tied like that. I didn't make this bit of rope. I inherited it or acquired it or picked it up at an auction or something. But yeah, it was tied up like that when I got it, and I've always left it like that because it works. So this was the day that the long tail was to prove absolutely necessary. It needed to be there. However, the first time I reached in to grab at the tail, the little darling decided that I was trying to hurt her. So she kicked me. And the point of her toenail entered the web of my thumb, and the kick moved downwards across the hand. Otherwise, it probably would have come out the other side of the web, because it was an enormously powerful kick. The whole hand hurts like blazes, and I've used cold water running into the penetration wound, followed by hydrogen peroxide, followed by soaking it in hot salty water and more peroxide, and then a drop of eucalyptus oil into the stab wound sort of thing. And I'm hoping that it'll come good. She didn't break any tendons or cut any arteries or sever any nerves, but by Jesus, she put a swamp wallaby sized hole in the web of my thumb. While she was recovering from the shock of having kicked me, with the noose around her neck, and she was lying on the ground where, you know, the struggle had gone on and soil had been disturbed, I managed to plant my little footsie on top of the knot, which prevented her from escaping with this tied up pretty tight. And then I succeeded, as she pig-rooted around and jumped and jumped and jumped. By the time she got around here, I was presented with that tail hanging out. So with one foot still hanging onto that, I was able to reach in and release it by pulling that. And a very wet, very bedraggled, very bewildered and frightened little swamp wallaby looked me in the eyes, shook herself, turned around, and from about that spot there, she disappeared, hopping away in that there direction, and I do not know when or whether she will ever show up to talk to me again. It all hinges on whether she's going to think of me as the lazy arsehole who didn't fix the fence in time to stop her from getting up onto the boom of the Buoywall-Tank and then slipping off, because it was all slippery with dew. We had a fog during the night and in the morning, and therefore trapping her in the swimming pool before showing up to grab her by the throat with a hangman's noose, and then require kicking and wounding before she was able to get free and hop away. If that's how she's going to formulate the memory of the event, she's never going to talk to me again. If, on the other hand, she figures out that, you know, the local friendly human managed to improvise rescue equipment from what was lying close to hand and get her out of the pool where she would have frozen and drowned and died, and I could have waited for that to happen and I wouldn't have got a hole in my hand. Yeah, if she decides that I'm the person who rescued her, then she'll probably come back for a feed tomorrow morning. If not, well, such is life. At least the pool didn't get wrecked and she didn't die, and all I got was a hole in one hand. And I can now say that I've actually been kicked by one of the critters, in this case a footling swamp wallaby, a weaner, maybe a year old if you count its time in the pouch. And yeah, if that's what a little one can do when it's sort of on its back and frightened and you're trying to rescue it and free it from a rope around the neck, then it is my sincere ambition that I never ever have to be administering first aid to myself after getting kicked by a big one. That's what a little one's like. Yeah, I can imagine being kicked by a big one. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Waltzing with a swamp wallaby in a swimming pool. Ciao.